Warm welcome to everybody for this second of the webinar series that we're holding at the moment. This is all part of the celebration of our 10th anniversary year. My name is Chris Underhill and I'm ambassador for the organization and formerly the founding chair. As you know, the pandemic has impacted everyone and everyone has or will play the role of a carer at one point or another. And so I think from our point of view, this is very important. And here today, we are beginning to look at the whole question of young carers. And that's the subject of our conversation today. We're keen to give a global perspective. Obviously, we're keen to highlight where we work in low and middle income countries, where carers are still in many ways largely invisible. Our topic today is we turn the focus onto young carers, children and young people with caring responsibilities for family members. So I'm delighted to be able to make a couple of introductions to you and welcomes. Obviously, we have our founder, Anil, with us, and he will be with our speakers today, working on the questions that he wishes to ask them and having the conversations. But what we're talking about today is we've got Saul, who is a British academic, social scientist, and is very well known for his work on young carers and is regarded as one of the world leaders for young carers research, policy and practice, having pioneered this field and worked with children and young adults with caring responsibilities for 30 years. Saul was a young carer in his childhood, as well as an adult carer, and so has a lot of personal experience to draw from. Welcome, Saul. And Melissa, we are delighted that you're with us. You grew up as a young carer, and you've campaigned for nearly 10 years to raise awareness and rights for young carers. Currently, you are a senior writer at Charity Times, writing news, features, and research from across the sector, inspired by your volunteering previously, for which you have won a Points of Light Award. Many congratulations and a very warm welcome to you. Just to say that we have Ruth Patil and Michelle behind the scenes working making sure that all the technical side works well for us, and also feeding questions to me when we get to that point in the whole of the conversation. We're going to be joined also by virtue of a film by a young carer from Bangladesh named Kakoli, and she'll be interviewed by one of the leading lights from our own partnership. Kakoli is from Bangladesh, and she'll be involved as well. And it's very important, I think, for us to be able to hear firsthand the situation of carers in the countries that we serve. So that's an overview of the webinar that we're going to have today, and we're going to work with Saul, Melissa, and Kakoli, and of course Anil. Anil, may I hand over to you to start the session with Saul?
Thank you very much, Chris, for your warm welcome and that brief introduction. Really appreciate it. Can you give us a broad picture of young carers, Saul, and why should everyone be thinking about young carers and supporting them?
So thank you, Anil, and thank you everyone for inviting me here today. So I think everyone will know that young carers are children under the age of 18 who provide care, support, supervision to other family members. And it can be also to friends. We've noticed in a set of recent research across 6 European countries that there are high numbers of young carers that are providing care to friends as well as to family, and those friends generally have mental health problems. So we're talking about a population of children across the world who are effectively taking on a range of caregiving roles and responsibilities for other families and friends. The numbers of young carers, because everyone wants to know, well, how many young carers are there in a particular country? There are two primary methods of calculating the numbers of young carers. One is through a national census, and the UK has been doing that. We've just done the third in 2021 national census every 10 years. And that gives you one figure for the numbers of young carers. And in the UK, that's worked out to be between 2 to 3% of all children are identified by parents or heads of households as carers, young carers. But the second method is when you ask children directly themselves whether they have a caregiving role. And there are a number of ways of doing that. You can ask children in a school, or children in a range of schools, or children on the streets, or children in any circumstances or situation. And when you ask children directly whether they have a caregiving role, you have a much higher figure than when parents disclose whether their children are carers. And in the United Kingdom, the last time we did this, which was in 2018, the British Broadcasting Corporation, the BBC, did this survey for us. They discovered that 10% of all children, that's 10% of all children, had a significant caregiving role in the United Kingdom. That equates to more than 1 million children in the UK alone. And in other advanced industrialized societies, the figure usually ranges between 6 to 10% of child populations are caregivers. And in third world, sub-Saharan Africa and other nations, the figure will be much higher, although we have no precise figures, but it will be higher than 10%.
Thank you so much, Saul, on that. I believe you have done some work in low and middle income countries, particularly sub-Saharan Africa. Would you like to throw some light onto it?
So over the last 30 years, I've been involved in over 50 research studies. And one of those studies was with a colleague of mine called Professor Ruth Evans at the University of Reading. And Ruth did the field work in Tanzania. And what we wanted to do was to compare the experiences of young carers in the United Kingdom and the young carers in Tanzania who were looking after parents who had HIV or AIDS. So it was a very focused study looking at the experiences of UK children and Tanzanian children caring for parents with a specific condition, HIV or AIDS. And what we discovered, surprisingly perhaps, is that despite the differences in the welfare system of the UK and the welfare system of Tanzania, and the economic circumstances of both countries, we found that children who were carers were doing very similar tasks in the UK and in Tanzania for parents with HIV or AIDS. So it was very similar tasks. The primary difference between Tanzanian children and UK children was that not only did Tanzanian kids have to provide care, supervision and support, but the big difference was that many of those children also had to go and find income for the family. Because there was no welfare state, there was no welfare system, there's no social security system that provides a replacement income to those families. Tanzanian kids also had to go to work, to the labour market, or to find other means, including begging, to get income for the family. So not only were they carers, but they were also providers, financial providers to the family. So despite masses of difference in circumstances and so socioeconomic conditions, there were still similarities in what children had to do, the intimate and personal tasks and all the other kinds of caring.
That's a great response to my question, Saul. Really appreciate that. Can you just throw some spotlight on in terms of the level of recognition here in the UK and Europe versus in low and middle income countries?
So the level of recognition for young carers worldwide, I would say, is pretty poor, pretty low. There are probably around 20 to 25 countries now in the world where there is a policy response to young carers. In some of those countries, it's a response which gives young carers specific legal rights. And in the UK, young carers have legal rights. In most of the other countries, though, it is not specific legal rights for young carers, but they're rights for children or for other groups, and which the impact of those other rights also land on young carers. So there is growing awareness in some European countries and other countries, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, and some Canada, etc. There are other countries which are very far behind, despite having some recognition and research on this. The United States has spent the last 10, 15 years moving very little forward for young carers. So there's a sort of varied response to young carers across the world. Most countries in the world have no recognition or response to young carers at all. And in sub-Saharan Africa and other countries, India, Bangladesh, some of the countries that we'll be talking about today, there is an emerging recognition of young carers, but they're not necessarily called young carers. They might be called child-headed households. They might be called children living with HIV and AIDS, or other titles rather than young carers. But and many of those children living with HIV and AIDS will be young carers, but there will be other conditions, disability, mental ill health of parents and other family members that are also drawing children across Africa and India, Bangladesh, China, some of the other countries that are getting some awareness of this into caregiving roles. So it's a very varied and mixed response, Anil.
You are absolutely right, Saul. Even in the countries where we are working, you alluded to Bangladesh, India, and Nepal, young carers or children having caring responsibility. Many of what families do call, or even in the society, their voices are not heard and their needs are not met. So I'm going to ask you, what challenges and issues young carers are facing? What is the impact of caring on them?
So, look, after 30 years of research, I think we can say with some clarity now and some authority that the impact of caring on children will vary depending on different contexts. So in a Western advanced system like the UK, European countries, we know from pieces of research and cross-national studies that the impact of caring on children, it affects their psychosocial development. We are clear that it affects their educational attendance and their educational attainment. We are clear from some longitudinal studies that have been conducted with pupils that when you look at young carers compared to non-young carers, it affects their grades. We also know that it will affect what they go on to do. So they are more likely to not access university than other children who don't have caregiving roles. So we know that it affects them in various ways during childhood and also in their transitions to adulthood. Emerging research shows that many young carers, particularly exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, are suffering from mental health problems, particularly during the pandemic when they had to take on more caregiving roles within their families. So that's the sort of research evidence from advanced westernized countries, some of the countries I mentioned before. In other countries, in so-called global south countries, the research is emerging. There's some academics who are doing some fantastic work. All of the things I've just described are common factors there as well. But again, but much more hidden, much more not recognized within families as caregiving, seen as a part of the intergenerational contract that children and families have in global south communities. So again, very much unrecognized, unsupported, and children carrying those responsibilities of care literally on their own. And as I said, also carrying responsibilities of having to replace the household income in the absence of social security systems and income replacement systems that would give cash benefits, cash transfers.
Absolutely, Saul. Same kind of issues we have been come across even in countries where we're working. So I would like to move on to asking you the next question, if we can throw some spotlight on that. You have worked the last 3 decades on the issue of young carers and support and all. So what support do young carers need, whether it is education, peer support, or social support? And also, if you take on to what needs to happen. One is what support young carers need and what needs to happen.
So I think, again, with 30 years of research and a certain degree of wisdom behind us, we can say that the support that young carers needs is multifaceted. It's not just at one point in their life, because the needs that young carers have change over their childhood. So when they're 5 or 6, and there is lots of evidence from census and other data that children as young as 5 are caregiving, their needs are different to a 12-year-old or a 16 or 17-year-old carer. So we need to know that needs change as you progress through childhood. And we need, as providers and service providers and practitioners, to be sensitive to the different needs of children at different stages in their childhood and transitions to adulthood. We know that they need support in schools, and they need help to navigate their education to get the best outcomes from schools. And there are things that schools can do to absolutely support young carers. We know that health and social care systems, whether they're in global south or advanced industrialized societies, need to be much more sensitive to the existence of young carers, but also to provide adequate support for the parent or other family member or friend with an illness or disability, because we can reduce children's caregiving roles if family members have better support or adequate support. So one of the things that we know from experiences around, for example, the Commonwealth, and there is a Commonwealth Charter for young carers that has been promoted and worked with young carers by the Commonwealth Organisation for Social Work, is that the more we can do to support families, the less children will have to do, because we take away some of those caregiving roles. But we can't get rid of all of those caregiving roles. You can't prevent all caregiving by children. So we need to support young carers through education. We need to support them with their own services and peer support groups. In the UK, there are over 350 young carers projects that work directly with children to support them with one-to-one, with counselling, with group work and so on. We need to recognise, I think, at the end of the day, that young carers are everybody's business. And so irrespective of who we are, but everyone in this room, in this webinar, will have some authority, some power to make a difference, whether it's to make a difference for the life or the lives of individual young carers, or to work on big issues, the cause, the issues that affect all young carers. So what I would like people to hear from me in answer to this question, Anil, is that young carers are everybody's business. Every one of us in this room has power and authority, even though we often think we have very little or none. We can make a difference. One of the things we know absolutely, and Melissa may speak about this, is that a good relationship between a young carer and a significant other, whether it's a teacher, an art teacher, a music teacher, a catering staff, a social worker, a mental health nurse, a friend of the family, or whoever, those relationships are the building stones, the stepping stones, if you like, to better outcomes for young carers. So we need to ensure that young carers can develop those relationships that are positive, that are role models, and that support young carers to navigate the complexities of being a child, a young person, and a carer.
Wonderful, Saul. We couldn't have kick-started session with such a powerful message. If I can just to wrap it up, so you made it very eloquently that why it should be everybody's business, particularly in terms of recognition and identification of young carers, and focus on supporting on their mental health, education, and also in particularly low and middle income countries. You have made a very quite a stark difference between the West and also in the developing or low and middle income countries. They not only have the caring responsibility, but they have to go out and earn an income. That is what we have seen in our cases as well. With the carers worldwide, we are also seeing that they are not just missing education, it is having huge impact on their health, stress level, not having an opportunity to meet with their peers, that social context you were talking about, and sometimes they feel isolated as well. With the limited resources, with our partner organization, so we're able to provide support to address some of those issues by sensitizing teachers and other supportive staff within the community, and identification of these young carers and how we could raise awareness within the family members that this person, in addition to the caring role, has the right to go to education and continue be part of the social system and all. So really, it was a powerful message. We couldn't have asked a better expert to kickstart this second webinar series on young carers. Thank you so much. And friends, Saul will be with us, and he will be back with the question and answer session. And I will be moving to ask question to Melissa.
Hi.
Hi, Melissa. So can you just, everybody knows about you briefly, Chris has introduced you, who you are and all. Can you share your experience of being a young carer and the impact it had on you?
Yeah, so I became a young carer about the age of 10 when my mum slipped a disc in her back. And then she couldn't work, and my stepdad needed to sort of help out with her. So I just did things around the house, helped cooking, helped cleaning. I went to school as usual. I couldn't go out as much with my friends, things like that, because I needed to help at home. I had a little sister as well. And then I wasn't actually identified until the age of 14. And by 14, I'd then become a young carer for my stepdad and my dad as well. So my stepdad had open heart surgery twice to repair a valve in his heart. And my dad had a head injury, so he couldn't learn how to do things, new things really. He's got really bad short-term memory even to this day. So by the age of 14, I couldn't go out with my friends. I couldn't go to the cinemas, go to birthday parties, because none of my parents were working, so we didn't have disposable income in that way. And also I just needed to help cook dinner, needed to clean, just needed to be home to help with medication. There was mental health needs in consequence of the physical disabilities. So it sort of piled on. And when I was identified at the age of 14, it was through a service working with my school, who identified my younger sister, and then were like, oh, actually, she's got an older sister. And we were one of the lucky few that had a young carers lead in school. So we got brought into school, and I just remember being asked, do you know what a young carer is? My mum sat beside me, my mum sat, and my sister sat next to me, and we were like, no, we don't, we've got no idea. And so she explained what a young carer was, why it was having such an impact on my school. So I've always been quite academically inclined, getting quite good grades and things like that. But the school started to notice they were slipping, that I was coming in late sometimes, things like that. So they were also indicators. And my school actually had a young carers lead. So that meant it was an open door policy. I had a pass. So if I needed to get out for any reason in the day, then I could just go to her and talk. If there was a bad day at home, I could just go and talk. And that was such a lifesaver for me. We had young carers groups every other week, so I could go and meet young carers in my school, other young carers. And you didn't have to mention that you're a young carer. You were just there to chill out, and you could talk about things if you wanted to, but it wasn't necessary. And just knowing I wasn't alone was a massive thing for me. And through my school, we went to Young Carers Festival, which was when I then met the staff of the Children's Society. And my sort of project lead was like, you're not shy about talking about young carers. Why don't you go and help them raise awareness for a program they were doing, Young Carers in Focus? So through Young Carers in Focus, I went up and down the country. I spoke to MPs. I spoke to anyone that would listen about young carers, the impact it had on me, the impact it was having on my friends, and people that I'd met through the program. I was one of the lucky few where in my school, young carers were recognised, that we had needed help, that we needed that extra support, and it was put in place. But the amount of people I spoke to where that wasn't the norm was incredible, and I couldn't believe it. I always say, I don't know where I would be today without it. I wouldn't have got to university, I wouldn't have got to college, because it was all happening through my GCSEs, one of the most important times in life, and I was there with other things on my mind, not my exams. So without that support, I wouldn't be a journalist here today writing about the charity sector, and that is a direct consequence of my experience.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing your personal stories.
As a
It's
young
a
carer,
very
and having
inspiring,
that support, because it's inspired me.
very
Yeah,
inspiring and powerful message. Can you just share a little bit how crucial it was about the identification of young carers and what the role the school can play in this?
It's incredible the amount kids are every day in most places. I get, not everywhere in the world, unfortunately, but in the UK at least, children are in school probably more than they're at home sometimes. So teachers can identify those smaller changes, if moods change, if they start coming in late, homework's not done on time, or homework's not done at all. They have that unique ability to be like, okay, something's going on, and have that conversation. Whereas not everywhere has that. GPs can be very helpful, and having that support in school, once you are identified, it can help increase grades. It can just help socially, because you can meet other young carers. And the idea of meeting other young carers is that you're not alone. You realise that you're not alone. And it's such a thing to help boost your own self-esteem and morale, because you're not the only one going through these struggles.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely, Melissa. No, thank you so much. Even within the carers worldwide, we have been working with more than 300 young carers. And as I said earlier, their voices were not heard, their needs were not met. And before we came into picture, they were feeling lonely, isolated, and nobody was listening to them. And again, the gender, majority of young carers are girls. 97% of young carers are girls. Again, unfortunately, in our South Asian society, most of the importance is given to boys, because boy is the one to carry the family name. That shouldn't be the case. And you really drawn into the importance of that early identification, and the support you have received has made an enormous difference to your life. And likewise, many of our young carers who were a part of this young carers club and young carers group we promoted, where they were able to talk about their own feelings, not about whom they are caring about it. It is about the difficulties they are going through, impact it is having, not having the whatever teenage life, all those kinds of things, missing out their vital education. So
just knowing where to go sometimes, just having that person to talk to
exactly
can make the complete difference. It doesn't always need to be respite, or it doesn't always need to be having that certain, like, it can literally just be having a conversation with someone one day that makes all the difference.
Absolutely, absolutely. So like you, we have a young carer from Bangladesh. You will hear about her story in a short while, in a moment. But thank you so much, Melissa, for sharing your incredible and inspiring story. Friends, Melissa will be with us, and she will also participate in a question and answer session. And now I would like my colleague Michelle to link to the Kakoli's video from Bangladesh. Just I will share a little bit about Kakoli briefly. Kakoli is a 15-year-old and she lives on the outskirts of Dhaka. She cares full-time for her older brother who has a learning disabilities. He needs her help throughout the day and she needs to assist him with washing, cleaning, dressing, and eating, sometime as well as making sure that he is safe. She is being introduced by Moinul Islam from the Center for Disability in Development, who coordinates our work with the carers on the outskirts of Dhaka. So Moinul has begun asking her question, how is the life as a young carer?
How affect her life as a young carer. So he will explain us. কাকলি, তুমি কি বলবো তোমার কিভাবে তোমার সময় কাটে?
আমার নিজস্ব কোনো সময় নেই, আমার সবটুকু সময় আমার ভাইয়ের পাশে ব্যয় করতে হয়। যখন ক্যারিয়ার গ্রুপের দল থেকে মিটিং আসে তখন যতটুকু সময় পাই তাও আমার ভাই আমার সাথে থাকে।
Kakoli said that life is really difficult and the effect he shared with us, which is she don't have any personal time for take care of her life full times. That means whole day she busy with her brothers carrying responsibilities. She also said that we have time, but that time was when we are going to the participate in the carer groups. That time we have the personal life, but this time also my brother with us. Now I would like to request Kakoli to share as a young carer her challenge with us. What types of challenge she faced during her caring responsibility of caring life. কাকলি, তুমি কি ধরনের চ্যালেঞ্জ মোকাবেলা করো যদি একটু বলতে আমাদেরকে একটু যদি।
আমি স্কুলে ফিরে যেতে চাই, কিন্তু আপনাদের সহযোগিতা ছাড়া আমি স্কুলে ফিরে যেতে পারবো না। আমার ভাই একজন বুদ্ধি প্রতিবন্ধী, তাকে দেখাশোনার জ্ঞানটা আমার নেই, এর জন্য আমার খুব কষ্ট হয়। আমি আমার বন্ধু বান্ধব থেকে আলাদা হয়ে যাচ্ছি, তাদের সাথে মিশতে পারছি না, তাদের সাথে দেখা করতে পারছি না, সবসময় একা থাকতে হয়।
Kakoli shared three challenges she faced. Those challenges she shared with us. One is she said that if she want to go to school, that means she readmit in the school. So she requested us she need support. Without our support, it's a very big challenge for her to go admit school again. Second, she shared with us as a young carer, she said that my brother is intellectually disabled, so I don't have enough knowledge on how to take care of intellectual children. So it's a big challenge for me without knowledge take care of my intellectual brothers. Third challenge she shared with us, day by day her friend circle is reducing. So it's a big challenge for her to go back to the friend circles again. I would like to request Kakoli what types of services she received through Carers Project and our carer groups, because she already is active member of one carer groups. প্লিজ কাকলি, তুমি একটু বলবা একজন কেয়ারার হিসাবে তুমি কি ধরনের সেবা পেয়েছো?
আমি কলমা কেয়ার গ্রুপের একজন সদস্য। আমি কলমা কেয়ার গ্রুপ থেকে টাকা নিয়ে বাসায় কাপড়ের ব্যবসা করে পরিবারকে সহায়তা করি এবং আমি যদি আবার সুযোগ পাই তাহলে আবার স্কুলে ফিরে যাব। তারপর এবং করোনার সময় কেয়ার গ্রুপ থেকে খাদ্য সাহায্য পেয়েছি, চিকিৎসা সাহায্য পেয়েছি, তারপর
Yes, Kakoli shared that what types of services she received through the carers project and carer group. She shared that she is one of the active member of Skolma carers group, and through the carer groups she received the loan without interest. And this with this grant money, with this money she started a small business. It's a cloth business in her house, and she also shared that this money, earning money, she able to contribute to her family. And she also shared with us she has expectation if the opportunity come again, she will back to the education life. So beside that, he also shared that during the COVID situation, she received food package from the carers project and carers group. She received medical treatment and the mental health support from the group, as well as she received the others group member support during the pandemic. I would like to request Kakoli, if you have any recommendation to us, please share. Kakoli, যদি তোমার কোনো সুপারিশ থাকে আমাদের কাছে তুমি এটা বলতে পারো।
যদি আমার ভাইকে দেখাশোনার পাশাপাশি আমি পড়ালেখা করতে পারতাম খুব ভালো হতো। আমি আমার ভাইকে দেখাশোনা করি, যদি এই নিয়ে ট্রেনিং দেওয়া হতো তাহলে আরও খুব ভালোভাবে ভাইকে দেখাশোনা করতে পারতাম। আর আমার হাতের কাজ যদি শেখানো হতো, পড়াশোনার পাশাপাশি ভাইকে দেখাশোনার পাশাপাশি আমি কিছু আয় করতে পারতাম।
Kakoli share three important things as a recommendation to us. First one is beside the caring responsibility, if we support to Kakoli, or if our country or government support to Kakoli to continue her education beside her caring responsibility, it is one of the recommendation from her side. Another one is she said that we don't know how to take care of my brother. So if we receive any kind of training on how to take care of my brother, so it will be helpful for us as a carer to take care of my brother as a carer. Then she shared that if we learn handicraft training, if we participate handicraft training in their house, so that would be helpful for them in future.
Thank you, Kakoli and Moinul. Moinul is on a virtual platform, and he will be available if there are any questions to him as well. So you heard from Kakoli and Melissa, and the kind of support we are providing to young carers to hear their voice and meeting their needs. Along with the caring responsibility. So we are hoping to encourage, in fact, in Karnataka, in South India, in one of the partner organizations, we are working with 70 young carers who are caring, we call a sibling carers, caring for a brother or sister who have disabilities. So what we done there is, it is quite fascinating. I'm sure our partner organization has also joined on this virtual platform. They're called Srushti Special Academy. So along with providing support to the adult carers, we are also providing support to young carers education, which Kakoli has talked about. So during COVID period, most of classes were run online. And what we done is we provided one tablet for each one of them, and to receive information for person whom they are caring, and adult carer as well as young carers as well. So in that way, in a small way, we are supporting young carers. So I would like to hand it over to Chris now. So over to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. We've got tons of people coming forward with questions, which is great. And I'm very pleased about that. Just a couple of things to say. What an amazing presentation we had from Kakoli, and as well, the messages that she was giving us were so similar in some ways to the messages that Melissa was giving, particularly in relation to education, which struck me as being very important, I thought. Now, we've got a number of questions that have already come up within the chat, and I wanted to bring in a couple straight away if I could. Ruth, just guide me to the first one if you'll be kind enough. Is it Debbie? Debbie Hastings? Yep, that's great. Debbie, you put in a great question a bit earlier on. Do you want to just very briefly outline your thoughts and then ask your question, please?
Hello, Chris. Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, very well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Well, it was sort of really two questions in terms of understanding what the position is on carers' rights elsewhere in the world. We like to think in the UK we have the best young carers' rights, but how well they're understood and implemented is another story. But is there anything to be learned from the legal rights afforded to young carers in other countries? And my second question was really around the utility of things like the Human Rights Convention and how that might be used to perhaps support, or certainly through the lens of young carers, be used to really emphasize their right, that they're children first and foremost. They have a right to thrive. They have a right to play and exercise and to education. And I mean, that is their right. How could we maybe use that to really help promote awareness around young carers across the world? Thank you, Chris.
Thank you very much indeed. Saul, do you want to jump in there?
Okay, so thanks, Debbie, for that question or set of questions. Firstly, the UK does lead in the world in that young carers in the UK have specific legal rights which are given to them through legislation, a sort of a patchwork quilt of different pieces of legislation which gives young carers specific rights. There are other countries, Scandinavian countries, that have similar rights, but they're not called for young carers, they're called for children who are called next of kin. So there are other countries then that give young carers rights like any other child. So UK is very specifically for young carers. So even though it's got a good legislative framework, we have to accept that most young carers, 75% of young carers, even in the UK, do not have their rights met through local authority social services. They haven't had an assessment of their needs. They get no services or support whatsoever. So we have a good legal structure, but young carers in the UK don't get those rights met. In other countries in the world, they don't have specific rights as young carers. You refer to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, and every country in the world, I think, except for the United States now, has signed the UN Convention. If I've made a mistake on that, and we have American colleagues listening, I apologize, but I think you were the only country that hadn't signed it. I think Somalia hadn't signed it some years ago, but has. So, and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child gives children under the age of 18 rights right around the world. So it recognizes this phase called childhood, even though we define it differently in low income global south countries compared to westernized countries. Childhood is a different concept, but all children in the countries that have signed up to the UN Convention have specific rights to an education, to a name, to participation, various articles which give them rights. In Commonwealth countries, there is now a Commonwealth Charter for young carers, which uses the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child as the framework. And even 30 years ago, in my first ever research report called Children Who Care Inside the World of Young Carers, I argued that children who were carers had specific rights which were based on the UN Convention. So that's when we argued 30 years ago for a rights-based approach. So I think the UN Convention is the platform, Debbie, for countries that are not engaging with young carers to start to say, look, children who are carers have these rights like all children, and we as a country need to start to meet those rights. We have signed up to them, except in the United States, and we need now to make those rights real for young carers.
Thank you, Saul, very much indeed. Joe, you had Joe Rickwood, you had a point to make, which is really about young carers services in this country and young service carers overseas. Did you want to just explain that a little bit further? And I'll invite Melissa to come back on this one.
Yeah, hello. Firstly, I'm very, very excited to be here. So it's lovely to see everybody in such support of young carers and from other nations. But it just dawned on me watching that as how can we our young carers in the UK get in touch with these young carers across the globe, share our experiences, maybe share some coping strategies, and just again, as Melissa said earlier, sharing that they're not alone. I know that a lot of young carers naturally have a caring nature, and if they will want to hear from other young carers from across the world that are perhaps not in, hate to use the word privilege, but you know what I'm saying, like live in have a bit more in terms of their education and perhaps a bit more income.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, just a thought.
Yes, thank you for that. And let me ask Melissa to make a comment.
Well, I don't know it from sort of a services perspective, but what comes straight to my mind is social media. There's a lot of people on social media nowadays, a lot of kids. And I'm sure there's probably already young carers reaching other young carers from around the world that maybe we just haven't put in a proper plan for it yet, or a proper way to facilitate this. But if enough minds come together, I'm sure there's a way of doing it. I'm not sure if there's a specific way that I'm not aware of yet that people are already doing that, but it's a great idea. I mean, I would certainly get involved and love to speak to other young carers from around the world, and I know heaps of people who would do the same, because like I said, communication, talking about it can make all the difference.
Absolutely. Well, there you are, Joe. You started something.
Thank you. I'm good. Yeah.
That's great.
I think Saul's got something to say.
Yeah.
So sorry, there are a few groups that do exist already. So firstly, there is the Euro Carers Young Carers Working Group, which is organised under the auspices of a pan-European carers association called Euro Carers. You can go on their website, Euro Carers, and this brings together young carers from across Europe to help decide on what should we be doing to lobby European governments, etc. The phrase is nothing for us without us. Nothing for young carers without young carers being absolutely at the core of everything that we should be arguing for. Because when you ask people like Melissa and Kakoli and others about their experiences, you are not having it through the lens of older people like myself and others. It's raw and it's real and it's immediate. And so nothing for young carers without young carers. So there's the Euro Carers Working Group, Young Carers Working Group. The Commonwealth Organisation for Social Work does a lot of work across Commonwealth countries, and you can look them up, Joe, and you'll be able to then be connected with them. Of course, Carers Worldwide can connect you with those organisations as well. And there's something in the UK called the Young Carers Alliance, and Andy McGowan is on this call, and that's a growing organisation, over 100 young carers organisations in the UK and 200 individuals. And I would be suggesting to every organisation that's on this webinar today, sign up to the Young Carers Alliance. It's free, and you will then be connected with an international network of providers and people working in this space.
That's great. Thank you, Saul, and thank you very much, Melissa. Lorraine, you wanted to make a contribution in the same direction as the conversation is going at the moment. Did you want to jump in here? Lorraine, would you like to come in at this point? You may be muted. Lorraine Stanley, you've put here, is there any way that we can connect companies that have money to spend with young carers organizations that need money to provide fundamental support to young carers? That would be fine. No, we haven't got Lorraine right now coming back for whatever reason. Andy McGowan, did you want to just make a quick comment on that? And thank you very much for the postings you've just been doing in the chat. Just come in briefly and make a comment, but particularly tell us about the Young Carers Alliance while you're up and on. Yeah, I think he's not able to unmute Michelle, and that may have been Lorraine's problem as well.
Saul, you're not muted, are you?
Saul isn't. I'm not trying to let Saul in. I'm trying to let.
But this is for Andy McGowan. Andy McGowan is muted, who wants to come in and say
Apologies, sorry.
About the Young Carers Alliance.
Yeah. And if Lorraine was there and trying to unmute, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So yes, my question was about, given there's such commonality around the desire for young carers to be able to have a good quality education alongside caring, is what can be done to try and achieve that in those countries where you haven't got those established young carer support mechanisms, young carers' rights. So that was the question. And then just as I mentioned about the Young Carers Alliance, thanks, Saul. So that's a growing sort of network. So we've got young carer organisations, you've got those involved in young carers research, you've got those involved in policy, all coming together to try and improve that identification and support for young carers. So there's events run throughout the year, there's various different mini projects going on, and it's for anyone who's got an interest in young carers to get involved. So I've put a link in the chat. There's no geographical boundaries. We had an NGO from Italy sign up recently. We've got researchers from the United States and from other countries. So if you're keen to find out more, do get in touch.
Thank you very much, Andy. That's absolutely great. And I'm sure that Melissa, in her capacity as journalist, might want to write that up, said I cheekily. That would be good. Anil, do you have any comments at this stage before we move on in the questions, just to make sure that you've got an opportunity to make a comment before we move into other areas of discussion?
Thank you, Chris. Just 2 points I want to say. One is Carers Worldwide is spearheading carers movement from low and middle income countries, and how we are able to connect with other carers in similar situation. In a similar line, moving forward in our next strategic phase, one of the key priorities areas we have identified is alliance building. So in that part of that, we are thinking about similar to the adult carers movement, is there possibility of us facilitating young carers movement from low and middle income countries settings. And the partly because in the countries where we are working, there is a lack of chronic lack of evidence, Saul, concerning young carers who are not able to engage the policymakers effectively. Of course, we are using the UN Convention on Rights of Children and making sure that every child has the rights, and those rights are protected, and right to education, right to a good quality life, and all those things. But because of lack of this evidence, we are a little bit struggling. However, more number of academic professionals are also interested. We are partnered with one of the national premier institute in India called NIMHANS, National Institute of Mental Health and Neuroscience. They are doing in collaboration with the Leeds University on young carers, young and adolescent carers.
Yeah, thank you so much. Monil, you asked us a question a little bit earlier, which related to education. Did you want to just come in and explain your question a bit?
Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. Great to hear you.
It was from my personal just a challenge when I'm working with the young carers. At times the education is one of the big challenge. So there is a virtual platform there. The people are here, they are very experienced on the caring young carer issue. So if there is any information or support what they are doing in terms of the education of the young carers.
So the question of education, very important. And Bakul, I want to just bring you in as well, because your question was similar but a little different. Bakul, you're welcome as well. Do you want to just outline the question that you had, which was relating to what happens to young people, young carers in the future? Do you want to come in, Bakul? Okay. Let's just ask Saul whether you'd like to finish off the Q&A simply by sharing with us what you think might be a useful way forward for young carers and education, the best way of getting linked up to good education.
So this is difficult because in low-income countries or global south, different labels are used at different times to describe. The challenges are extreme, you know, in terms of poverty, a lack of social security systems, infrastructure, etc. And so I think that we shouldn't underestimate some of the challenges of getting children's rights recognized under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, particularly when conceptions of childhood are different in different parts of the world. So, you know, the notion of childhood is a social construct, and it's and the realities of that are quite difficult to materialize or deliver in some parts of the world when the strains and stresses and economic circumstances are difficult. But if we wanted to go away from today with a sense of positive optimism, we should go away, because pessimism delivers nothing, and pessimism destroys people's belief that there can be a better future and that today can lead to a better tomorrow. So I have to be optimistic, and in 30 years of doing this work, I have seen not just major changes in the United Kingdom, but major changes in other countries as well. It's been slow in terms of my life, because it's been my whole academic and adult life, but things are moving quicker now, and education, I think, is at the key to recognizing young carers' rights. So one of the ways forward for me would be that more schools in all parts of the world do studies or surveys to identify how many young carers are there in your particular school or your collection of schools, yeah? And there are ways to do that. You can ask us about that and the Young Carers Alliance. There are surveys and ways to do that in a standardized way, which will tell you that X proportion of your children are young carers. In the average classroom in the UK, with 30 pupils in a class, there will be 3 of those children, 10%, that will have a significant caring role. In countries like India, Bangladesh, and other countries, in the global south or low-income countries, if those children have got to school, there will be more. But the issue will be that many of them won't even have got to school on that day because of their caregiving roles and because they're having to replace the family income because there isn't a social security system. So we need evidence in schools to show the number of children who are carers or who would have come to school had they not been carers and have had to stay at home. We need to show what that does to their educational attainment and attendance, and we need to make sure that everyone recognises that it's everyone's business. The key thing for me is that we have talked about hundreds of young carers being helped by carers worldwide, but there are millions of young carers across the world who are in the same situation as Kakoli and other people, Melissa and myself when I was a child 60 years ago, etc. And we have to recognise that helping individuals is critical, but doing something about the bigger case, the bigger cause, is also critical. And there are ways to deliver that change.
Thank you so much, Saul, for that passionate declaration right at the end, which of course we all very much appreciate. We've come to the end of our seminar today, our webinar, and all I would like to do is just to say thank you so much to you, Saul. Thank you very much, Melissa, for your contribution. We've thanked Kakoli through our partner, and Anil, thank you so much for having created this organization in the first place, along with Ruth, and for the amazing quality of the talk today, which I think has been really good. A couple of takeaways: the recognition of young carers, which is exactly what Saul has been talking about in many different ways. The incredible importance of the right kind of practice at school, very important, that as Melissa has been talking about, and of course affording an education to young carers, Kakoli talking about that to us. So much more that we could say in the summary, but those were sort of three of the very major key points which came up to me. We have our next webinar coming up in September, and we'll keep you in touch with that, be mailing you with it. It's on the topic of carers' mental health and well-being, an extremely important topic, which I'm sure you will agree. And do please follow us on social media for updates about forthcoming webinars as well. Thank you so much for being with us, and we very much look forward to being in touch with you in the future. All the best, and do take care.